9 minutes from then, he'd be saving my life. 2:21. We heard a round of extremely loud pops. We had no idea what it was or where it was coming from. The class was in complete silence, and we all stared at each other in immediate fear. Within seconds, we heard it again. We all immediately ran. The class split in half. Half of my class ran to the safe spot, which was out of the view of the window that was in the classroom door. The other half was diagonally across from the window, in complete view. I was not in the safe spot. As I sat down, I remember telling myself if I were to get shot anywhere, I wouldn't make it. I needed to be behind something. The only thing in front of me was Nicholas Dorett. Helena Ramsey began passing books down so we can shield ourselves from bullets, but yet everyone thought it was a drill. 2:22. I clenched the book from Helena and then looked down at my phone to call my mother. As I raised my finger to hit the green call button, the loud pops were now in my class. I thought to myself, what kind of senior prank is this? As I began to see red on the floor, I assumed it was a paintball gun. I looked up and saw Helena Ramsey slumped over with her back against the wall. I began smelling and inhaling the smoke and gunpowder. Then Nicholas Dorett rapidly fell over in front of me. I followed every movement of his body. When he fell over, I fell over with him. I then placed myself underneath his lifeless body, placing his arm across my body and my head underneath his back. Bullets continued flying. I kept my eyes on the ground so I knew when to hold my breath and close my eyes when the shooter got near. I began talking to God. I told God that I knew I was going to die. I asked him, please make it fast. I didn't want to feel anything. I asked for the bullet to go through my head so I wouldn't endure any pain. I laid there for about 30 seconds, still protected by his lifeless body, waiting for the shooter to move on to the next class. After the shooting stopped in my class, his body became very heavy. I couldn't breathe anymore. I rolled him off of me and placed his head on his arm so he wouldn't be touching the cold ground. I sat up and looked over. Helena was still in the same exact position I last saw her. I froze. Still in absolute view of the window the shooter shot into, two of my classmates then pulled me behind a filing cabinet. We were all crammed, some on the phone with 911, some on the phone with their parents. I immediately called my mom. I told her my last goodbyes. I told her how much I loved her. I apologized for all the things I might have done in my lifetime to upset her, and then the phone hung up. I then called my father. I told him how much I loved him. I told him to tell my brothers I loved them, and I said my last goodbyes. I couldn't hear anything they were saying to me, but I made sure they could hear me, not knowing whether it was one shooter or multiple, and not knowing whether they were coming back or not was an unimaginable amount of fear, sitting behind the filing cabinet waiting to die. I began hyperventilating. My classmates began breathing with me and trying to keep me calm and quiet. It didn't work. They then covered my face. I felt like I was suffocating, but it was to keep me quiet. 2:30, Broward County Police Department was heard from outside the shattered glass. I thought it was the shooter playing a trick. Then a SWAT team member came to check the pulse of Helena and Nicholas. He then looked at me with compassion and said, I know. We all ran out, passing bodies in the hallway on the way out. When I got outside, I was completely disoriented. The police then said, he's still on the loose, guys, and we need you to work with us. I was petrified. 4 o'clock. I finally found my friend and her mother. They noticed the unimaginable. They called the police over, and they began picking body matter from my hair. I completely broke down. The police took me back on campus to gather photos of me and collect my bloody dress. They placed me in a chemical suit meant for chemical and biological exposure, then recorded my statement. 9:30, at the Marriott Hotel, I was finally allowed to physically touch my mother. It was absolutely horrific, so real and mind-numbing. I would never forget what I saw, what I did, and what I experienced that day. I will never forget Nicholas Dorett, who even in death helped protect and save my life. Days later, we received news that my mother would be having a miscarriage because of what the shock of the shooting did to her body. The shooting didn't only impact me on February 14th, it impacts me every day of my life. I've also lost a family member to gun violence. I lost my uncle Patrick Edwards in the streets of Brooklyn, New York. He was shot in the back. The bullet then pierced his heart. He was only 18 with his whole life ahead of him. And unfortunately, that is the same story of thousands of Black and brown families across the country. Gun violence disproportionately impacts Black and brown youth, whether that being police brutality, homicides, or domestic violence. As for people of color, law enforcement is the shooter in some cases. History of bias, brutality, and racism in so many communities. Like many of my brothers and sisters of color, I am not comforted by deputies with handguns, let alone assault rifles. I am very concerned since learning Brett Kavanaugh's views on guns and how he would strike down any assault weapons ban. Too many dangerous and prohibited people continue to be able to readily access and use dangerous weapons to terrorize Americans at home, work, church, school, and on our streets and anywhere we go on our day-to-day life. As you consider what to do and who to appoint to make us safer from gun violence, remember my story. Remember my classmates who died. Remember the victims of color that face mass shootings every day. Remember all victims of gun violence from Parkland, Brooklyn, Miami, Milwaukee, Oakland, and all over America. As you make your final decision, think about it as if you had to justify and defend your choice to those who we lost to gun violence. If Kavanaugh doesn't have the decency to shake hands with the father of a victim, he definitely won't have the decency to make life-changing decisions that affect real people. The youth is urging our society to recognize the depth and seriousness of the gun violence epidemic in America. We are all here with an urgent message for you. If the youth across the country can fight to eradicate gun violence, why can't judges, lawmakers, and Donald Trump understand that young people are dying from this senseless gun violence? Thank you.